and then share my screen. Do it right now. All right, so welcome everyone to this presentation, Take a Stride into Class, looking at student perceptions, highlights from COVID-19 surveys. If you were in my course over the past 19 months or so, you probably had something called like a quiz zero, or at least like bonus items here or there on quizzes, or maybe even an exam or two along the way. And most of those items are basically things that, if they were not actual bonus questions themselves, things asking people basically what their perception is about the current pandemic, wearing masks, if they're going to get booster shots, all different kinds of things, basically. Let's see. Also, are you still able to add individuals from the waiting room right now?
Yep, they're coming in now.
Okay, cool. So it's a little about me and my backstory. I am a Texan, raised in the South my whole life until I got my Ph.D. on May 15th, 2015. And by May 31st, 2015, I was in California because I had a goal to escape the South as fast as possible. So I've been here ever since I got my PhD in 2015. California, have my Caliversaries every June 1st of each year, just kind of honor the fact that I got myself here and out of the South. I'm gonna visit the South this Christmas though, get to my parents because I haven't seen my parents in several years, couldn't travel or anything. One of the recent surveys actually that I didn't put into this was a survey asking students basically, and this was like on social media, not in class, but asking basically, when's the best time to get a booster shot? Should I get booster shots, before Halloween, before Turkey Week, or as soon as I possibly can? Basically with the idea being the antibody counts might decrease over time. And that's when I go home to Texas for Christmas, I have to go to an airport, pay a baggage claim, be on the plane next to someone and the seat next to me not wearing a mask. It's like, when's the best time to get a booster shot for traveling? And the vote came out to be before Turkey Week, so I might get it in November, we'll see. In any case, our lives, as we all know, changed immediately last year when everything basically came to an end following the diagnosis of Tom Hanks, Rita Wilson, and Rudy Gobert. So we otherwise had an in-person life going on as normally planned, as normally intended. And then suddenly by, early, like mid-March, basically, March 11th, my very first ever lecture I did on Zoom. Right, so the picture on the left is what things look like in normal times. The picture on the right was, the screenshots from my very first ever Zoom lecture I gave March 11th in 2020. And it was, it was first for CSUSM, then it happened for UCSD, and then, which was like final exams week, it was online. And then it was for USD, a Catholic school I also teach at in Linda Vista. And just immediate change from stuff, right? So the images, on the left side are the ones that remind us of what things used to be like. And it's not just that we were going through a pandemic in terms of the virus last year. There's also a pandemic that we were discussing over the course of last summer about the issue of race, prejudice, inequity, things of that matter. And that played a pretty prominent role in some of the things that took place last year as well, even like for myself personally. So the transition going from how life was to what we were dealing with the past 19 months and trying to go back now to regular life, I think it's going to take some time. I've had several colleagues and friends even mention to me that they have felt some degree of challenge just readjusting when it comes to, I have to leave my house at this time to get there. I have to like leave from here to get back this place this time. I can't do laundry during lecture anymore. I can't fold clothes or cook while watching lecture anymore. That basically being back in person has forced a reshift of things that people otherwise had maybe gotten used to over the past 19 months, but are back in person again. And so the lifestyle we had before, where it's like, okay, we can be at UCSD in the morning and then be at Cal State San Marcos, afternoon, 2:30, and be at USD in the evening, like the image here on the left side, last year, President's Day. We have to get back into that schedule of things, change our sleep schedule again, because when everything's on Zoom, why go to bed earlier? You can just wake up and watch the lecture online. So there's going to be some degree of like reshifting, reallocating your schedules, your daily routines, getting back in the habits you used to have, that you have to kind of unlearn certain things slowly, unlearn certain things to get back into your previous flow before everything was shut down, right? All these virtual papers are great. So my red pen is still really sad. My red pen's going through withdrawal, so it's not graded papers in such a long time. And it's even the case that right now I'm still going to be giving exams on Zoom just because, think about it. when's like the 1 week or like the 1 day each quarter or 2 days, midterm and final exams, the days when everyone comes into the classroom sick and coughing and sneezing. And it's on exam days because of the stress of exams. And so imagine being like in the full classroom, people are wearing masks, but like in the full room and someone next to you starts coughing or sneezing. Are you going to be as focused on your exam at that point? Because, if you see a cockroach crawling out, you can just smush the cockroach and you have your sense of safety restored. If someone sneezes, you can't like smush a sneeze. It doesn't like go away that way. So to give people a sense of safety while doing their exams, I'm still doing it virtually. And most students, in fact, voted to have it done that way themselves. But it's just, we have to get back to the sense of normalcy that we used to have just by default again. And it's going to take some time. It'll differ for different people. All right, so kind of going into some of the survey items that I gave out over the past year. We'll start right here. I'll actually start with the one that's most recent to give you a sense of just what people's current viewpoints are, and we'll kind of go back in a timeline from there. So most recent survey I gave out, kind of like the last large major one, was looking at students, since the silver linings that they perceived over the course of the last 18, 19 months or so. So not having to worry about, how you look, your appearance, while you're in lecture. You can turn off your camera, right? You can just like put a clip over it, during lecture, or just have it off completely. Whenever a lecture is over, you turn off Zoom, turn off your camera. People usually clip it because they want to maintain privacy in case someone hacks into their laptop, right? There's all these little things that we started doing during the course of the pandemic, basically trying to stay safe, trying to manage as best as we can. One of the things people have also mentioned as of late is other individuals are not talking over them as much while they're talking face to face. The other people, I think maybe because we had satellite delays with Zoom, because sometimes if one person's delay was 1 second, other person's delay was like 3 or 4 seconds, based on their Wi-Fi, that we might have developed a habit of not talking over other people because we learned to just like wait until someone finished like what they were saying. And there are like certain like expressions people give off while talking that usually let you know someone's about to finish their current comments. But via Zoom, it's hard to pick up on those same things. Like that's just one of those things that might have actually helped us be more courteous in conversation, having to deal with satellite delays, Wi-Fi delays, interacting online. One of the things that I think is unfortunate to a degree with the way everything started in person again is that it wasn't maybe as positive or optimistic as it could have been. If we had started in person back in like June, it would have been a whole different feeling, I think, for people, because everyone's optimism about the pandemic ending really took a fall when Delta came in. So a lot of individuals in these surveys, basically like most students, indicated that they felt somewhat of a decrease in optimism due to the Delta variant. And so they're feeling great in May and June, they're fully vaccinated now, and things getting back to normal. They're going maybe to some concert somewhere or like taking more risks going to restaurants. And then Delta came in July, let's say mid-July or so, and that just kind of decreased everyone's optimism a little bit. And as people are kind of back in the mindset now that they were in February and March due to the Delta variant. But we're thankfully kind of getting past this one, hopefully with no other variants coming soon. So going like back in the timeline, some of the interesting things that students reported doing, I looked at based on their personalities, looked at differences they might have mentioned based on sex. And one of the things I found based on personality differences with students and their behaviors on Zoom was introverts are more likely to have their camera off. So having your camera on or off during lecture, right? In degrees like which you might conform and following your classmates or professor having their cameras on, that introverts were more likely, most likely than other personality types, introverts and extroverts, to have their camera off, no matter what anyone else was doing. Extroverts more likely to have their camera on, no matter what anyone else was doing. Ambiverts were, as you might expect, somewhere in the middle. But there's quite a few things that turned out to be related to personality in some of the data that was collected over time. So something else related to personality was when the pandemic ends and we're like, let's say in 2025 or some distant future plane, the pandemic's over, you can go outside again, it's safe to interact socially. Would you still engage in social distancing? Would you still like keep 6 feet? Would you still decline offers to go to parties or invites to restaurants? Like, would you still want to remain with some degree of distance from others in social life? And that was primarily true just for introverts. Right now, to be clear, Most individuals reported some degree of like something in between, even introverts, some degree of distancing, some degree of socializing. But among those who primarily reported they wanted to continue being socially distant, it was introverts. And it just kind of, you have to give people like a chance, like some time to reacclimate. Because you can't go through what you went through like in the last 19 months and just act like it's not going to stick in them in some way. It's not going to, there's not going to be a vestige of that experience in their behavior, even when things appear to be returning to some degree of normalcy. And extroverts, of course, are more likely to want to maybe jump back into regular life sooner than introverts. Right? There's no real surprise there, just based on personality. So looking at how masks affect your social life and your behavior, your experiences, one of the things with masks people, I think males might have overlooked more than females, is how masks affect your appearance, like let's say makeup. And so between introverts and extroverts, it was mostly extrovert females who mentioned that masks tend to like mess up their makeup. It tends to maybe ruin what they otherwise had like done, putting on foundation or things that matter. Whereas introverts are less likely to mention that, possibly because introverts might not be going out as much and might not be as consequential. So the introvert extroverts designation was based on surveys given with Quiz Zero as well. The only thing that was kind of coded based on just looking at subjects themselves or students themselves, who they were, was just their sex. So in terms of coding sex, it'd be based on someone's name. Only if it was like a clear cut, like if someone's name is Fred, well, I'm gonna put male, right? If someone's name is Julianne, I'm gonna put female. Now there's some cases where someone's name was Taylor or Riley or Blake or Cameron, Madison, something that's like somewhat gender, Alex, is it Alexandra or Alexander? Things that are somewhat more gender neutral where I can code sex. But for the most part, if there was like names that were more or less clear cut, or if you even like put the name into Google and like say the preponderance around the world, this name is like 8% of people with this name are male. That's one way you might, code that to a degree if it's someone ambiguous to you, or let's say a different language you don't speak. So someone's name is Jiang. Is Jiang like a male or female name in that part of the world? But for personality, it was a direct question. Looking at dating. So this is one of the questions on dating, but basically the logic of this overall prompt on the bottom of the screen was, Cameron and Madison, are dating, they're talking online, they want to meet in person. And Cameron has no mask selfies on his profile over the past year. How could you not have a single mask selfie on your profile after the past year? I mean, how? Not one. Like, not your profile picture. Like, I guess that's not going to have a mask in your profile picture, like the upfront picture, but at least somewhere in your profile between like now and like April 2020, it should be at least one mask selfie. And so introverted females are more likely, or introverts in general, more likely to indicate that they would maybe break up with the person if they didn't, want to change the behavior. They bring it up in the conversation. They wouldn't ignore it. Also, any additional questions or thoughts on this so far? Feel free to, put things into the chat. I'll be checking as we go along, just like Sam's question a few minutes ago. I'm open to having just a free discussion with this stuff as we're going through. So don't let me, I want it to seem like I'm just going to, exposition, just giving all this stuff to you. Feel free to kind of jump in. If anyone raises their hand, please let me know about that as well. Going forward from there. Something else looking at introverts and extroverts. Being back in person again, you might have to not just reacclimate to your scheduling, going to bed at a certain time, leaving at a certain time, but also maybe in the classroom, where do you want to sit? Where would you usually sit? And so think about social distancing in terms of space from other people and like where you sit in the room. And it's the case that on those questions, introverts were often indicated they would sit in one of the aisle seats. The aisle seats basically are not only farther away from, say, a crowd being around you, but the aisle seats are also the ones where you have a designated space to like your right or to your left, and there's no other person. There's like a human-free area. And so in terms of distancing behaviors, the aisle seat would be safest, right? The other thing would be how you want to study. Are you looking forward to going back into study groups, or you want to stay solo? Introverts, again, are the ones who might want to stay solo more often, honestly, extroverts. Now, going back to like the spacing in the room, there's like this interesting gender effect I found for this. It's separate from personality, but just based on sex alone. Women were more likely to indicate staying in the middle of the room, middle of the rows, relative to males. So just ponder over this for a moment. It's like early gender seeing pattern. So males in the front or back of the room, but females overrepresented in the middle of the rows. So when we were like going through this initially, I didn't even have a mask until like I'd say mid-April. You guys might not recall what took place with the mask discussion in March and April, but at one point, and this is before they had Rochelle Walensky at the CDC, but before Rochelle Walensky, the new CDC director, there was a advisory that you shouldn't go out and buy masks because it might not be as helpful or something. And then like by early mid-April, the advisory was everyone should get a mask immediately. Please wear a mask. This thing is likely airborne, which, you know, so you guys might not recall that, but that actually was like the immediate change in advisory for mask wearing between March and April. And the reasoning is because they wanted to preserve masks for healthcare workers. They wanted to preserve masks for physicians, for nurses, for those working, first responders trying to treat patients with zero VID. And there were individuals, you know, trying to go out and buy masks in mass, you know, so they can like stock on all the masks and sell the mask on Amazon.com and try and get some big profit from selling masks. There was one individual who like bought all the hand sanitizer across Tennessee or Kentucky and tried selling it on Amazon. I think he was found by law enforcement or something took place with that. Basically, they're trying to avoid a mask shortage because we have what's called now a mask marketplace. Like there's a mask market. And so whether it's, you know, Top Gun or Cotton On, Victoria's Secret had a mask. I got my mom Victoria's Secret mask. Mom has Victoria's Secret mask now. So, you know, there's now a mask marketplace, but in March there was not. And so because it was a marketplace for masks yet, you could easily, you know, buy them all out. And thus we have no one, you know, none for those in the hospitals working with patients. So that's the reason why the messaging changed the way it did, why it was like, you know, don't get a mask in March and all of a sudden in April, get a mask immediately. But also I always kind of feel like it might have been better to say, make your own mask at home, like make a do-it-yourself mask at home until we have enough to give out to everyone, right? As opposed to like, don't wear a mask at all. But in any case, I got my first like giant stack of masks from my RAs in my lab, a grad student here in like mid to late April. So this is from one of my grad students RAs, and you sent me like a big old pack of masks. And it was just like the first like real thing I got from someone during the pandemic. My parents also like sent me some gloves to wear. So I have like, you know, blue gloves. I have medical gloves I used to wear going to the grocery stores to push carts around. Because at that time we also kind of thought that maybe it was like touching stuff that was unsanitary that might lead to infection. We now know that fomites or stuff that's on surfaces is not as contagious as stuff you might breathe in the air. But even so, I still wanted to have on gloves pushing grocery carts in the store if I was going to wait outside with my hand on the cart for half an hour to go inside the store, right? So this is what it looked like back then. Go into grocery stores, it looked like that. Long lines outside. Everyone with their cart just waiting to get in. That's how much life changed. Immediately, just immediately. The image on the left side of the screen is basically going to something I hypothesized about last year during the initial 8 weeks of quarantine. So CDC had like an 8-week recommendation for quarantine at first. So 8 times 7 days, 56 days overall. So day 21 to 56 for the 8 weeks for quarantine. And I basically had this prediction that we're currently going through like the least diverse experience in our lives interpersonally. So you might have diversity on Zoom interacting with people who are from different backgrounds than yourself, but there's nothing that you can experience on Zoom that's going to reflect what it's like being next to someone in the same room and like sharing a table with someone who is a different religion, different race, different ethnicity, a different sexual orientation in yourself. There's nothing that you can experience via Zoom that's going to replace the in-person experience. Individuals who might be prejudiced or biased, for instance, they might love watching a Hispanic celebrity on Netflix or Hispanic celebrities on Comedy Central, but they don't want to have a Hispanic maybe individual next to them at a table, right? Because when they're on TV or on Netflix, they're far away. It's safe, right? So you feel safe because you actually have discomfort with that person in person. And that's when they're on Zoom or Netflix or away watching them on stage at like a theater or cinema hall. you might feel safe in that context because it's structured, right? They're going to stay on stage. I'm going to stay in my seat in the audience. That's it structured. I know what to expect. My discomfort's gone. When you're interacting with someone, it's just everyday life, seeing someone in a break room who's a different race than yourself. That's very different from being on Zoom. And so I kind of had this idea that over time, our overall comfort with intergroup interactions might show a decline based on the lack of interactions we have that were diverse with the pandemic. Because unless you are dating interracially or in an interracial marriage or you're a multiracial person yourself, it's hard to mimic or create that sense of diversity in everyday life when we're distance, right? So diversity on Zoom, really easy to come by, easy to experience. You know, my lab, very, very diverse, had great times on Zoom. We're still being on Zoom right now because safety, but it's just also the case that this is going to lead to a decline in, let's say, interpersonal comfort with diversity, which might lead to negative outcomes over time. So one of the surveys this year looking at this question found that students, in fact, for the most part, indicated that some degree of diversity they had before, if it changed at all, it changed in terms of a significant decrease, right? So the yellow and purple, let's say, are indicating some degree of similarity. So most of your bonds before the pandemic were interracial, or most were monoracial. And then the blue on the far right side, or the orange in the middle, is saying that's like the same as it was before. But in terms of those that like said it changed in some way, it changed in terms of being less diverse, which is the blue on the far right. Right? So that's like the larger change. Change in terms of being less diverse, as opposed to changing into becoming more diverse, which would be the green one over here. So the one effect of the sense that your interactions are now less diverse because we were on Zoom for so long, might be that the things you get in diversity training, let's say, your kind of like default state of courtesy and, you know, looking at everyone like with the best lights and not assuming any malintent or assuming negative things, like suppressing implicit biases, all those things that otherwise would have been on defaults, no longer on defaults. And so thus you might make an error in perception of someone that you otherwise would not have erred on if you were never distanced in the first place. So one of the things that, you know, took place with me in particular that I went through last year was I was really racially profiled, like right here in my own office. There was a custodian who came and like knocked on my door and just stood there in my door, in fact, thinking that I was maybe a perpetrator in the building or something. They said I was like a suspicious person as I was sitting like right here at my own desk, sitting right here, working like on SPSS and stuff, you know, that evening, December 16th, you know, 2020. And you know, the person in the YouTube video, which you can find online pretty easily. It's just like put my name in Google and look up racially profiled, and you'll find a video pretty easy. But you know, he stands there for several minutes and just like kind of looks at me. He makes a phone call at some point, and this was at 8:16. I figured out afterwards that the phone call he made was to law enforcement, you know, the campus police, because he thought I was someone suspicious that needed to be dealt with, right? As I was sitting in my office. And so next encounter takes place around 9. I hear like a knocking on the door, right? It's like at first I'm on the phone, like talking with campus police, like saying, I think, you know, this trespasser's back. I think he's back. He won't leave me alone. Then I open the door, and the people at the door actually are also police, right? And so it's like on the phone with the police, while police are also at my door, it's like this whole weird scenario. But that second encounter where I have to like give my card, like I was carded in my own office, right? Like I'm a criminal or something. But you know, the key thing I've said about this whole thing, UCSD police are amazing. UCSD police did their job perfectly. They responded to something that someone, you know, called them about needlessly, but they responded, you know, with great, you know, valor, serve and protect, did everything perfectly. By the time the conversation was over, they looked more at the guy who called them as though he was a problem, which he was. So I mean, this ends around like, let's say 9:03, 9:04, something like that. And for the next like 60 minutes or so, I'm just like sitting in my chair, like just speechless, right? And so going through that racial trauma, which ironically, think about the summer, like we spent the summer discussing the issue of race, right? Going through that racial trauma is something that has, to some degree, almost like defined one aspect of my everyday life in 2021, just like trying to reacclimate my sense psychologically being in this space and feeling safe. And so it was somewhat difficult at first because there was like the ongoing hostile climate that took place, right? So one of the things that happened was there were like trash cans fell outside my door randomly for the first time since I was here in 2015. So whenever they changed the trash can bags in the evening, they would just like slam them on the ground, like make loud sounds outside my office. And it's like, oh, like we're back again, you know, that kind of thing, like trying to almost like threaten me with the noise. Eventually I got my locks changed, got a sense of safety restored just from that alone. But it was a process, right? It's been a long-term process. And so going through any kind of trauma, whether it's racial trauma or anything else, you're going to have some degree of, let's say, triggers that are going to just like creep up and affect you as you're trying to get back to homeostasis, get back to the way that I was on December 15th. And it's a process. It's an ongoing process, right? I'm still kind of dealing with the trauma of what took place even today. And it's getting better, it's improving day in, day out. But I have to believe, like honestly, if we were never distanced in the first place, if you were never away from diversity, then that would never happen. Because I think that guy would not have thought I was a suspicious person if he was used to seeing me more often, you know, or other like Black people around campus more often, like in a non-distance, you know, life, right? But we were distanced all year long, less diversity, and thus those kind of defaults, you know, biases that people might otherwise suppress or don't even have in the first place when we were in person, those were not active anymore. And that's what kind of led to this happening. At least that's what I believe. That's what I choose to believe. That's what I imagine the best. But so I got my locks changed, you know, eventually. There's also like a door like over to like the left of my office that I had like the door disabled so no one can enter like through that door. There are a few times I heard like someone like dangling keys next to that door, almost like trying to threaten me, like saying I can get in this way as well. It's like I got a door like disabled over there. And it's also currently barricaded. Facing custodian one day does like try and, you know, make a move against me. But, you know, it's just like a way of trying to get back to a sense of safety and peace in this office. So again, these are things that I believe only took place or could have taken place because of how different the past year has been. Being distanced from everyone else, you know, the sense of disconnection from diversity that we never really experienced at all in any kind of degree. And we're slowly kind of getting back to where we were. I think that the next most normal year we're going to have, the next normal year, quote unquote, we're going to have, is probably 2023. Because if we're honest with ourselves, we're probably not going to be out of this experience mentally in 2022. Even if the Delta variant was like gone today, right? The one that recently sadly took Colin Powell, Secretary of State. Even if it was gone today, we would still have like the mental, psychological anguish experience, you know, imprinted, embedded into us the past 19 months. It's going to take through 2022, I believe, to get through that fully, maybe even longer for some individuals. It's a major mental health thing that we have coming up. All right, questions, thoughts, or comments on anything the last few minutes that I've discussed before going forward? So let me bring back something on a much lighter note.
Jarryd?
Oh yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
You know, this Sam night, and just get your response. I had a conversation with a student that I was mentoring in March of this year. So she'd been she was a transfer student. She'd been virtual the whole year, had never stepped foot on campus. And this is like in March or April. And she made a comment that that the remote classes were okay. She was doing fine with those. She'd actually moved to Hawaii to, why not be remote in a really lovely place since she wasn't going to be on campus. She had some family there. But the thing that was really disturbing to me was that this was March or April, and she said in her conversation, I made my first friend, because in the virtual classroom, there weren't opportunities to make friends. There was no, I'm sitting next to somebody, I walk into the class, I walk out of the class, I go get a coffee. Did you get any sense of that in your surveys?
So difficulty meeting people socially or virtually on Zoom. I think people most often stay close with their existing friends, that their friends that they already had in their life were key to helping them get through this pandemic in the first place when they're at distance. So BFFs like top the list in terms of like, what was most critical or crucial for helping you manage or get through the pandemic. Making new friends, and it's hard to, it can be difficult to do. So if you're in a class that had some kind of group project assignments that you had maybe organized or discussed virtually, then you might have found a friend out like based on that, based on what you did for the project, put together, presented together via Zoom, or like turned in as a term paper on Canvas board. Or maybe you even like interacted with someone on a social media app like Discord. So like one of the major things that took place the last 19 months was people were using what's called Discord more as an app online. I'll just like spell it there. Discord is something that's still being used now, by the way. It's like one of those things that has lived past the pandemic. Individuals who meet and talk on there are more likely maybe to actually meet in person eventually or become friends, and they might play video games together online, those kind of things. Because Discord was like kind of made with gaming in mind. It's like a video game based interaction app primarily, but now it's been used education-based things the last 19 months as well. I think that's the major way in which social development, new social bonds will have taken place, is via online apps like that, where you bond first over something you have a shared fate over. And so a class project where you have a shared fate, you have a shared grade you might get together based on your output. Then you might become friends or stay friends afterwards. You continue interacting even after the class ends that quarter. That's the only way I can really imagine taking place. Because, yeah, Discord is really, really helpful. It's been better than Google Docs could have been or anything else I can imagine really for the pandemic. And oftentimes I might first post something on Discord and copy and paste it into an announcement on Canvas just to make sure everyone else in the class gets it who's not on Discord, of course, right? And there's always like this sense of Discord is like usually made by a student in the classroom. So I never made a Discord thing myself as a professor. It's always a student who will make it and send me like the invite link. I'll post a link on Canvas so everyone else can kind of join the link. And they'll make myself and TAs admins on Discord so we can oversee what everyone's doing. If there's an exam out, if someone like sharing exam notes, talking about the exam on Discord, we can like delete that directly with oversight and stuff. So it's been really, really helpful. Really helpful, very active, as Stephanie's saying. I'm glad it survived the pandemic as well. I'm glad it's still being utilized. Also, going back to what Sam was mentioning. Oh, go ahead if you have a question. I was going to mention one more thing on Sam's point, is that for individuals who felt like really a sense of distance, they also tend to turn to voice assistant apps or maybe interaction. That increased significantly over the past year, using things like Replica, talking to your voice assistant, Alexa, Siri, Cortana on Windows. That is just a paramount increase in that, because if there's no human being around you to talk to, then talking to the app felt like maybe something to supplement your loss of direct human social support or connection, and like your immediate social context. Go ahead.
I wanted to ask a question too, if that's okay. I don't know who was gonna go just now.
I think it was you.
Okay. Yeah, so I just had a quick question too. I wanted to know like if you got any information about like if physical fitness and kind of like mobility, like well-being, that kind of stuff, like going out and running or working out, like that kind of stuff, if that played a factor in helping students and people get, through the pandemic in any kind of way.
Helping people get through the pandemic itself, I didn't have any direct questions on that regarding exercise. I had to pull an exercise that looked more at the question of like, do you wear a mask while you're out exercising? That kind of context, but not so much about to help you get through it. So it's an interesting point.
Okay, yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, because I feel like for me personally, like exercise like itself is like one way that kind of like is kind of like an escape for me from like, the whole Zoom and academic world. And it allows that kind of like freedom to, see outside, see the trees, see, whatever it is, that kind of thing, to escape the whole virtual world. And I feel like, with, so many universities going on lockdown, with like gyms being closed, with, stadiums being closed, it didn't really give a lot of opportunity for those students to take advantage and, exercise the way like they may usually do. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's been hard to come by because there's not like an open gym you could have used the past 19 months. I just recently got my REMAC thing renewed, to just go work at REMAC, play racquetball, basketball, lift weights and stuff. And even there, you have to wear a mask while you're inside REMAC or main gym or anywhere else. But it's such an important thing to do to like try and keep your mental self even keeled, to exercise just some fitness and cardio, jogging around a little bit here and there. I haven't used an elevator since last October. I've taken like 5 flights of stairs up here to the 5th floor of my office every day since last October. And it's just like a really small thing, but it's probably helped me maintain my abilities, like dunking the way I otherwise would want to while playing basketball outside. And even like while playing basketball, like I'm still going to be wearing a mask, right? So it hasn't changed either as we move here.
Okay. I also just wanted to add one more thing too, because I guess it's just the way I set up my schedule when I was like in school, but it's like I had like 2 back-to-back like 3-hour classes. So I was in class from literally like from 12 p.m. to like 6:30 p.m. I mean, yeah, from 12 p.m. noon to like 6:30 p.m. later that evening. And so throughout the whole duration of like that portion of my day, by the time I get out of class, it's like already, it's already dark, it's already night. And, by that time I've been sitting in a chair for like 6 hours straight, you know what I mean? So it's hard to get that kind of, exercise, if you're sedentary for that amount of time. However, of course we could always make time before or after it, to really try to put that in, but it's just a little bit more difficult.
Very true. Very, very true. I mean, I easily had like the same kind of schedule you're mentioning. I had like a lecture, let's say at 8 o'clock in the morning to 11, and one that would be 11 to 2. It's just like back-to-back things. And there's like no real way to maybe get back into yourself immediately after that. I mean, I would find a way every now and then, just go to the court, there where I live at outside, but it does like kind of create a more sedentary experience than otherwise you're used to. You might have lecture breaks where you stand up for a few minutes, pace back and forth maybe. Yeah, it is like a much more sedentary life. So I think like the quarantine 15 is like a real thing for a lot of people, right? And I think that's what we're maybe trying to work on or deal with right now, is that quarantine 15, in terms of like exercise, fitness, even like our sleep patterns, definitely like our sleep patterns. Like one key thing actually the students mentioned was they tended to be going to bed later. Because why would you wake up early to like get a good parking spot or to catch the bus to campus if there's going to be a lecture on Zoom? Like, why wake up early? And so people tend to go to bed later and wake up later. You can wake up 5 minutes before class starts and eat breakfast during a lecture. Don't have to wake up early to like do your hair, put on makeup, get dressed. I mean, just wake up, turn on Zoom and go make breakfast while Zoom is on in the background. So I'm also the faculty advisor for Active Minds and what's called the Mixed Student Union. We have over the past year really thought about how we can maybe help people get back into their sense of self in terms of mental health with Active Minds, knowing it's going to take some time, some work to get back to where we were before the pandemic started. And with the Mixed Student Union, we like really had a chance to look at a major national issue that affects multiracial students. So there's this thing called multiracial erasure that we started doing surveys for students on in the classes. We did a few earlier this year and then like one recently that started fall quarter. And basically it's just the way in which multiracial students are coded into the system. And if you think back to the discussion on inclusion we had last summer, this kind of fits right in there with it. So if you're someone who is like half Vietnamese and half Black, there's no way you'll ever like receive anything or be emailed anything or be notified about anything about your Vietnamese background, because the system's only going to have you in there as like a Black student. That's it. So you'll never hear anything about being Vietnamese the whole time you're in college. That basically means that part of your potential college experience is being erased or denied to you, not because of malice. It's not out of hatred or malice. It's just because the systems that we have developed were developed with monoracial people, one race people in mind. And so if you're someone who's multiracial, the system's not really built just maybe to encompass you, and thus it just cuts out half of who you are. So we have like in UC system, this thing called like the primary ethnicity hierarchy. It's on the bottom of the screen right here. And so in my classes, I would just like, poll students overall, just asking like for those who are multiracial, multi-ethnic, if you've experienced this or not, if you feel like you've experienced this or haven't been made aware of certain things, because only part of your identity has ever been acknowledged by the system. And that's like kind of been our major advocacy thing that we've like started to focus on as a student union, mixed student union, to try and maybe change this, like not just for students here at UCSD, but I mean, across the country, hopefully at some point in time. I mean, that has to be something that's going to become like a more mixed country, that we make sure that those who are mixed have the full experience that they otherwise could have afforded to them, and not have a system limits, their potential experience in academia and scholarship. So, like to use an example real fast. If you are someone who is, let's say, part Korean and part Hispanic, you will never receive, let's say, information about your Korean background. I mean, that's basically, you're only going to be seen in the system as being a Hispanic student, not a Korean, South Korean student. So that's the issue of erasure. And this was like a poll we did about like back in the spring. This is looking at the same poll, but it's like all students in the classroom. So basically 20% of the students in the class are those who are multiracial who feels like they experience this issue. There are some also that are multiracial who feel like it's not a big deal for them, but let's just consider that at least 10 to 20% of our students feel like they've experienced this issue because they're multiracial. That's a lot of Tritons who are going through this. A lot of them don't even know this until we bring it up to them, right? And this was the one that was done a few weeks ago, this autumn. Similar kind of outcome in this poll. So whether it was like my own personal experience being racially profiled here by a custodian, the hostile climate I dealt with for a few months thereafter, or the thing multiracial students go through, there's been a lot of things we could discuss the past year that looked at issues of diversity, inclusion, at a time when we were like in the most diverse moment of our lives in everyday interpersonal interactions. Because there's no more break room or Starbucks at lunch to go talk to your friends in different backgrounds when you're mostly at home in mostly same race marriages, households, that kind of thing. So one of the things we also like looked at was when students are interacting in the like everyday social life, what are some things they do to try and fit in, to try and manage, to try and be accepted? And this survey was looking at student strategies to try to deal with the managed prejudice. So one of the key things we found is that students are more likely, let's say, to change your name in applications, like use their initials or like, use a quote, anglicized name. It's like one of my best friends, who's from Beijing, her real name is Lin Jin, but the name she goes by in the United States, she goes by Alita. Another friend name is Yi, but in the United States, she goes by April. Right, because those names might help her to help them to get a job, to be called for an interview, to be accepted for something they apply for. And so changing their name, from say a name that has an East Asian background to one that has anglicized background might be beneficial for them, just given the biases associated with how someone's name might look, and we perceive a certain accent about the name or a certain ability to interact with customers or people based on someone's name. Students mentioned like not bringing cultural foods with them to school or to work because I don't want someone asking about what they're eating, trying to hide their accents, so on and so forth, right? So these are things that students report that they do. That students who go here to UCSD report that they do in like trying to manage based on their differences in everyday social interactions. I know a key one that I do all the time. I always like ask for like the receipt, because just in case someone asks you on the way out, did you actually buy that? Do you have enough money to buy that? You don't look very rich. You look very dark, not very rich. Like, so it's always like get a receipt just to make sure in case someone looks at you and thinks dark skin tone, I'm not sure he could afford that. You have the receipt in the bag with you, right? Which isn't great for climate change or for the environment, but it's good for your safety. So, I mean, this is like one of those things outside the pandemic itself, but it's more based on that other pandemic we were discussing earlier about, race and equality and equity and a sense of diversity, inclusion, and justice, and what people might go through based on different backgrounds they happen to have. Any thoughts or questions or comments just looking at this? Anyone has their hand raised? Okay. Going back to some of the survey items related to the pandemic itself. So one fun survey item was looking at, let's say, how have you managed in like your leisure time over the past year? Let's say with your online activities, playing video games, right? So video games is something you might do for leisure time as you're just passing time, you know, in quarantine at home, not going out anywhere to clubs or parties or friends' houses. You might just pass time playing video games. People in the past year reported playing more games that were online as opposed to single player games. And this makes complete sense that they would play more online games in the pandemic, because you can't see your friends in person, but you can like talk to them in an online game, like while you're in character, you know, playing Overwatch or PUBG or Pokemon Go. Then hey, why not play, you know, this online game and talk to your friends that way with a headset on or something, or typing into the in-game chat. And so online games like really kind of showed a major increase in utility over the past year as a way to like still interact socially, get that sense of belongingness met, the sense of support met in your life, while also being safe from, let's say, the virus interacting like in person, face to face. Oh, thank you, John, for that too. I mean, it's until you discuss it and bring it up, is I think just overlooked. It's not really known about that much. And so, thank you for that. Actually, on the video game thing itself, I did a presentation. I did like this hour plus talk early this year. I was actually paid for this. It's just like how amazing this was. I was paid to give a talk this year on my experiences playing online video games. I'm not kidding you. So it was for a conference that was held in Texas. And by held in Texas, I mean it was held on Zoom. So it was for a conference, took place this March. I was paid $100 for this talk because I had been doing a lot of ethnographic, you know, just kind of data collection, experiential data collection as myself on online game as gamer girl, as I call myself. And the key thing is that other players in the game world have no idea that I'm not a Middle Eastern woman, right? That I'm actually a Black man. And so there's no headset, there's no voiceovers or chat like in game itself for the game I'm playing primarily for this. But the ways in which people interact with you is just like fascinating. My research, in fact, at UCSD is focused on like sex, you know, gender, sexual orientation, courtship, mate preferences, dating, infidelity, you know, things like that. And so whenever people interact with me in the game world and they like want to give me free stuff, or they want to help me beat some boss and ask like my Snapchat account so they can try and date me, or like when the same person in the guild asks you on 3 dates every like 3 days in a row when you log on to the game, and you have to like say no each time, as nice as you can say no, so you won't like try and kill your character. But basically, it was just discussing these insights I gained over the course of the pandemic, because hey, we were distant, we're online more, and why not play video games? And I played, I guess, enough video games to actually give a talk on my experience playing video games. So it was an experience, let's put it that way. So let's go back to a few more of the surveys that students reported on just on their own experiences adapting to things over the course of the year. This was what I considered a quote wellness check for students. This was last year in the fall, asking students basically how they were doing at the moment. And one thing that's really clear about the pandemic is that Zoom fatigue is very, very real. Students were tired of being on Zoom for every single lecture. But I don't think campus fatigue was ever really an issue. Like campus fatigue in terms of having exams and quizzes, assessments and assignments on campus, that was never as much of an issue. I gave a poll this quarter, quiz 0, asking students, you know, basically, would you want to have your exams or assessments to be online, or would you have them, have them in class, in person again? And democracy prevailed. I mean, most students basically said they want things to still be on campus when it comes to assessments, but they would like to have like lecture in person. So. Right. So the Chinese individuals, anglicized name. The other thing about that, Sam, I make a quick point about this, is that I think that sometimes if your last name, let's say, is Nguyen, so let's say it was someone named Jian Nguyen, and in America, the person goes by Michael Nguyen. Well, if your first name is Michael and your last name is Nguyen, you might be multiracial. And if you're multiracial, and let's say, let me imagine it this way. We usually picture that the person who might be in an interracial marriage, who's going to convey culture, let's say the offspring and kids, or who's going to like raise kids primarily, is going to be the mom. And so if someone's last name is Nguyen, that means that the dad's last name is Nguyen, but the mom's last name isn't. And so that means the dad is Chinese, but the mom is white. And so if they're half Chinese and half white, and they decide to go by the name Michael in the United States, or let's just say in general, then like an employer might assume, oh, last name Nguyen, first name Michael, must be multiracial. If they have a white mom, there might have been like socialized based on, say, more of like white female socialization as opposed like to a Chinese dad socialization, and thus they might be a good fit, like working with customers here in person, interacting and stuff, based on having a white female socialize them more so than say a Chinese father. Especially if like the parents are divorced, they might assume it was like the mom purely was the socializing agent. And so in that case, the Nguyen component of the last name might be less of a thing employers might look at. So it's like the assumption of being multiracial might also be a factor when it comes to changing your name in a way, for those who might use the United States. We have like a few minutes left here, so we shift over to some of the final things I want to impart over to you guys. So some of the etiquette that we learned to display on Zoom. A lot of teachers tend to wave goodbye, like wave hello, wave goodbye whenever they start or end Zoom meetings. Even say when I got on with the Nates and I was like, kind of waving at the screen, just like saying hey, or like do a peace sign, things like that. People tend to pick up on doing that over the course of the year. It was netiquette, right? We learned that as part of our things that I use Felix, netiquette, right? So waving goodbye when the meeting ends, netiquette. And I think that to some degree, we're still doing that on Zoom. I still do it myself on Zoom as we left us. Just like we're not talking over someone as much as you might have before, because you have to like wait for a satellite delay, because that Wi-Fi is going to differ for different users, different laptops, different people, and we like learn to wait before saying something, right? I showed a little bit earlier some of the material on dating. If someone has like no mask selfies, when it comes to people's overall perception of Zoom dating itself as something they enjoy doing or didn't like doing, there is a clear sense of we want no more Zoom dating ever again for the rest of our lives. So Zoom dating had like the lowest variability of like almost anything I pulled the whole year. I think root canals had a higher overall support than Zoom dating. So root canals over Zoom dating, like easily. Just something that never really caught on. And I think part of the issue with Zoom dating is, I mean, for one, Zoom more or less democratized height, right? So height's like one of those pillars of patriarchal masculinity. And on Zoom, you can't really tell how tall someone is. And so if someone being taller is important for a sense of attraction to that person, let's say in heterosexual courtship, the male being taller than the wife, then the fact that height really can be perceived on Zoom might have affected Zoom dating. Someone having a slower Wi-Fi might affect it because you might talk over someone more or make more errors and mistakes. It's not like a smooth transition from that person's sentence, that person's sentence. You kind of lose some timing in the jokes in terms of like when someone laughs at the joke, right? Zoom dating just never really was going to catch on. Also, we like to study in my lab. We found a pattern where people tend to talk to their exes more if they were single, because your ex is someone you already know, but being someone new, like why do that while you're distant anyway? So people do in fact want Zoom to remain, just not be an everyday thing. They love the option of Zoom right now. A lot of students will still watch things recorded right now asynchronously, or live if possible, but they don't want it to be an everyday thing. I think that came out clearly in a lot of surveys and also just current behavior with students. Any questions or thoughts on that? And just like a few more like quick fun things before we close out. So there's a poll looking at people's preferences when it comes to technology and cleaning. Would you want to wash dishes fully by hand or use technology? And for reasons I cannot explain, the majority went entirely by hand. But you have a machine right there that's like called a dishwasher. So it's always surprises me because usually people will like rinse off the plates, put them in the dishwasher, put Cascade detergent in, it's on the machine. In any case, I mean, think about like the way that Netflix changed over the past year. Like Netflix started to ramp up their creation of shows that were dubbed in different languages, like English as well. The reason why Netflix changed that vernacular is because if people are going to be more often at home, then they might want to watch more shows. The current slate of shows might at some point expire in terms of like, you can't rewatch, The Office 5 times, maybe 4 times The Office, but not 5 times. And so Netflix decided, well, we can't safely film new shows. We can't like film new series maybe as easily right now while we're distant. It's not even permitted to do so. It's not allowed yet, maybe. But they decided that doing voiceovers, at home, if you're a dubber, if you're a voice actor, you can do that at home safely. You can like record things to a studio for a show that was made first in Spanish and now it's in English, or it's first made in South Korean language and now it's in English, like Squid Game or something. So dubbing really kind of took off over the past year and a half just because it was safer to do than being in person filming a new series. And people actually just wanted to listen to different shows without the subtitles being the key thing to actually engage with. But if you're working at home remotely, you're maybe trying to like fold clothes, take care of kids running around the house who are like being homeschooled, you might want to be able to enjoy a show while it's dubbed in English. You can like hear key like plot points, maybe from a distance while you're making dinner, while you're cooking things or work around the house. You can hear plot points, listen to like the dialogue in the show. You won't miss anything major. If it's all via subtitles, that kind of takes away your attention. You can't do something else with the subtitles. You have to sit there and focus on the screen. And so dubbing shows while we're in a pandemic and trying to multitask at home remotely gave people like more ways to watch shows in different languages than they otherwise couldn't if it was only based on subtitles. The other thing is also, if we're looking at a screen like this for hours a day, like someone mentioned a few minutes ago, like they were in class for 6 hours from like noon until 6 p.m. Looking at a screen for 6 straight hours, you won't have to look at a screen again when you're in your leisure time, relaxing, looking at subtitles. You want to give your eyes a break. And so Netflix dubbing more shows give people's eyes a break. They can enjoy the show in English while they're doing something else, but their eyes relax a little bit. And it's also the case that we immerse ourselves in the stories, into the characters in stories, with shows, movies, video games, even books. So think about it this way. When the Cowboys are doing very well, like they are right now, Cowboys won this weekend, America's team, I'm going to feel good about myself as a Texan because Cowboys, right? And so if our team does very well, we're going to like cheer for them. We're going to feel good about ourselves. If our team loses, like they did last year, because the quarterback got hurt, we're going to feel maybe worse. But we like identify with a team and their success makes us feel better. The same thing is true for a show. If your favorite character dies off or is cut from the series next season, you might feel like you had a breakup, like you lost someone close to you because you love that character. Now, if we have shows that are dubbed, that are made from the narratives and experiences of those in South Korea and Japan and China and India and in Spain and Germany and Brazil, a lot of things from Brazil. If we have shows that are made around the world, we can now access and experience in English, for those who are not multilingual. That means we can now identify with characters beyond just our immediate westernized realm of thinking about stuff. Right? We can identify with someone who is South Korean, identify with someone who's Indian in a way that we maybe couldn't before, and like care about their outcomes because we can enjoy the storyline now in English. So I think dubbing shows actually leads us in a more inclusive direction because we can experience different cultures and we care about it while we're engaging in a leisure activity. So I know we're at the hour now. Are there additional comments, thoughts, questions on things as we kind of wrap this up here?
Any questions in the chat? All right, well, it is 11 o'clock. Thank you so much, Professor Willis. This was such an amazing discussion, and I'm gonna give like a round of applause as an etiquette and a wave as well. You taught us. And to all of you as well, thank you for joining us today. For more homecoming information as far as additional events, both in person and virtual, please visit us on the website, homecoming.ucsd.edu. We have a whole week of exciting events just like this. So thank you so much for joining us and have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you guys. Have a good one. See you.
Thank you, Professor Willis.
Homecoming.